My name is Barbara Minguez Garcia. I'm a consultant specialist in the Facility for Disaster Reduction and Recovery, GFDRR. And first of all, I want to welcome all of you to the session and thank particularly session because it's really critical for understanding risk to have this topic forum. It is still really challenging to integrate heritage into disaster risk management, although when disaster occurs, it affects it's impossible, the recovery is. Cultural heritage, both tangible and intangible, contributes to local and national economies, providing jobs and livelihoods, promoting tourism, and giving local communities with a sense of identity, history, and social cohesion. It is fundamental due to these characteristics is highly vulnerable to hazards, particularly to climate change impact. And this is why this session is so important to take place in. This is calculated through the combination of hazard, exposure, and vulnerability. And since hazards are out of our hand and reducing exposure of heritage is reducing vulnerability. The Climate Vulnerability Index that is going to be presented today is a tool to assess climate, assessing both the vulnerability of the outstanding universal value, that is the significance that makes heritage be exceptional for the humanity, and the community vulnerability, based on the economic, social, and cultural dependencies upon the cultural property, and the adaptive capacity. You will see in the examples from the Caribbean forts, those illustrate very well the application of this and realize the state of the cultural heritage and understand the risk they face to prioritize and optimize investment. Looking forward to seeing the presentation, so I'm stopping here. Thank you again for to the team for bringing and sharing this experience, if possible. Thanks. I think we have a video to show. Maybe the technical team can help us again.
Share the video, is that you? If you hit screen share at the bottom of the screen, it should bring it up. There you go.
Perfect, thanks.
Thank you, that's okay.
I'm afraid
Text video recording.
You sorry, if you stop sharing screen for 1 second, sorry. When you press screen share, you need to press a little button in the bottom corner which says share audio.
We also saw that there was no assessment tool that could types of properties. So we took upon this challenge. Hi, my name is Scott Heron. I'm my colleague John Day. We have developed and designed a climate vulnerability index, which we'd like to introduce you to today. This all began for us as a part of the storyline of responding to World Heritage. But let's tell you about organisations, ECOMOS, cultural heritage, IUCN, natural heritage, and United Nations bodies recognise climate change, saw that there was no assessment tool that could determine the vulnerability to climate change for all of these different types of properties. So we took upon this challenge and we've responded to develop this tool that of protected areas, natural, cultural, combined, mixed properties. It's systematic. It to be systematic, to define how we could respond now rather than waiting for change to come upon us. And importantly, it put into context with other factors that could make properties vulnerable. Now, throughout this presentation, you will see, so explain those a little bit, but please, in all of those cases, think about the values for. That's the key, and for outstanding universal value, but it is applicable otherwise. The initial framework that we began from was based on the IPCC vulnerability approach from the third and fourth assessment reports, but we modified that so that in place of vulnerability, OUV vulnerability for World Heritage properties, and we also incorporated some modifiers to these exposure and sensitivity, then added on, following on from some other work done that from our colleagues and collaborators, to add a community vulnerability component connections. Together, this entire framework is what we refer to as the CVI. And this is the key values of the protected area. So this property of interest. For World Heritage, these values are derived, that is recognised by UNESCO. For other areas, it may be another document that for that internationally recognised values. We also understand that there are significant property values that are in addition to those. I want to recognise, to give you an example, these are pictures from a World Heritage property in the north of Scotland, the heart of Neolithic Orkney. And you'll see there that 8 specific values, key values for this property were identified. Among those, the 2 that are bold that formed a basis on which other values depended. Look at those values and we ask the question from this list of key climate stressors that we have identified together with other collaborators in consultation with climate experts, aspects of heritage. And for our first large application of the CVI in Shark Bay, Western Australia, key climate, temperature trend, long-term changes, temperature events, short-term burst events, and the change. For the Orkney application, there was some overlap, but there were different key climate stressors identified for application. World Heritage property again identified the 2 temperature, the long-term and short-term, as well as the sea level rise. Those reports that you see the covers of on the right-hand side are available online, and we can give you that information. There are some other descriptors for each of these climate stressors, some synonyms, some associated that may fall for the two temperature aspects. Some of them happen over long terms, that's the chronic stress, and some of them are those as acute stresses. So what do we do with our assessment? We use IPCC thresholds of exposure of the key values of a property to a particular climate stressor are. We also look at sensitivity to those impacts from climate change, and we assess them using definitions that were based on IUC. You're mapping through here as well. In addition to those categories, we also look at some modifiers for exposure and also for sensitivity that can help us to understand how these factors are influenced. Those must be smaller parts. So that's one way that we incorporate the extent of very large properties. Some natural properties are very large, and we use those two assessments, the modified exposure and modified sensitivity, and a customized sheet that we've approached and assess the potential impact shown here in purple. From there, we look at the adaptive capacity of the values, and these are factors like the resourcing and the technical know-how that exist within the property, but also we look at the effectiveness of those strategies to address the climate stressor that's involved, and effectiveness is an important within this. Impact and the adaptive capacity assessment in a risk matrix approach to produce our values vulnerability. And we on a traffic, all of those pieces come together. These are assessed for each of the three key climate stresses individually, and then combined together. The next stage, the lower section of the framework, looks at economic, social, and cultural. Connect the heritage of a location to the people who are associated with it. We do this looking at the three elements directly associated with the property. So for the Orkney example, we looked at tourism, heritage-related industries. We looked at research and education, and goods and services. So they were the four business types that were assessed within that workshop. That of connections for people who have visited the property and been a part of that substance there, and what important points are. In addition to that, we also use cultural assessments. You can have a cultural connection with a property even if you've never Indigenous and non-Indigenous cultural connections. Within the framework, we use this ESC approach. Look at the dependent of the application, and we also consider the adaptive capacity of the community in terms of the economic, social, and cultural components. Assessment that's undertaken using climate data and the knowledge from experts together in the room to consult on. We combine the dependency of the community to arrive at the potential impact on the community that could come from changes. We then take that potential impact on the community, we add in the adaptive capacity to arrive at our measure of community ability and EVI analysis. Here's the framework again, just to run through it. We look at a risk matrix approach to use the exposure and sensitivity to define the potential impact. That combines with the adaptive capacity to look at the values vulnerability. That arrive at a community potential impact, which combines with the adaptive capacity term to look at the community vulnerability. To finish off introduction, I'd like to see how this looked. So here the three key climate stresses are in the columns: sea level change, precipitation change, storm intensity, frequency. Projections were assessed. The sensitivity of the property, the key values of the property was assessed using the expert information from the managers of the property. The potential impact was determined. The adaptive capacity use the local knowledgeable people, the experts in this area, and then we arrived at our OUV vulnerability. That then fed in the assess local representatives and key people on the ground at this location, who also helped us to determine the adaptive capacity, community vulnerability. We're going to now see some new case studies that are relevant specifically this.
Well, now is the moment of Hachi from We Architects. He is the CEO of We Architects, and he's going to be the Caribbean island of Haiti. And please go ahead, Hachi.
Okay. Good day, everybody, and thank you for being here. I will share my screen. Can you hear me properly? Yes. Can you see my screen? Well, I'm architect. I'm working in Haiti since 2012, 2011, and we are working in those projects with Haitian architect called understanding those peculiar buildings, those peculiar fortifications in the country. I will talk about two sites. One is Cap Gerard and the other is the Fortress of Platons. Both the Fortress of Platon is located on the top of a mountain and is in a dominant position in the south, near the village of Becai. Mostly the location because of the landscape, because in the back of this Fortifications National Park, and very interesting natural site with high mountains. The history, because he lies the General Jeffrat, one of the for the independence of the country, and because of the peculiar architecture of the fortification, the topography, and to the top of the summit of that mountain. The fortification of Platos, the fortification that the General Dessalines after the independence of the country, ordered to in the you have the image there how is located platons in the south, and one of these networks, the history park of the Citadel in the north. But we will focus with our work on Platon. The other side, the other building, it was a colonist house in the farmland near the Kai, but it's very symbolic. It is very important because of the Mitrat and the Salins in 1803 to consolidate the national unity for the war of independence, January of 84. Okay, both fortifications, two hurricanes, and that images you can see the most destructive over that zone. It is the Flora, the Hassel, the Cleo, the Ines, David, and Matthew. The was the Matthew in 2016 that left more near 5,000 dead people. So in this slide, I want to that 20 years has been increased from the average of the war 20 years, 3.75 to 6 storms by decade, no? And we have one major hurricane in the last 20 years. They are really they are post geological situations. Okay, if we speak about the rainy place with where rainfall occurs seasonally with heavy rain periods. So, in order to determine the vulnerability of these places, and with the that we will apply to the exposure, to the sensitivity, to the potential impact, the attractivity, and places. So firstly, we will work with the exposure, and we will find that intensity and frequency we have to be likely and very likely considered. And the modified because increasing from 3.75 to 6. So we have two values here, the likely. Speaking about sensitivity, Camp Gerard is the sensitivity of Camp Gerard is before the Matthew, before the Hurricane Matthew in 2016, and after the Matthew. There are only ends of the colonist house that is there. So they're very high because of they won't support another Matthew hurricane or another 4.3, no more. Platons is different. Platons is placed on the top of a mountain and is more humidity, and that vegetation is doing is damaging the structures, the of the of the fortification. So we consider level 4 height. Fires are in level 2 with the spatial scale extensive and low probability of all because of the place. This is a natural place, very rainy and very hot. In fact, in the case of Cap Girard, we will have an impact, very likely exposure because of the very high sensitivity of the place. As I told you, it won't support another hurricane. And in the case of platons, we consider high because the high value exposure. So now we will analyze the two scenarios. No? If we do nothing with this project that is funded by the IDB, that is the Inter-American. If we do nothing, we keep with a low capacity to refer it to local management capacity and scientific and technical support. And we have a low capacity also in platons. It's the same. It's the capacity that we have in Haiti is very limited. The intervention, reinforcing the Camp Girard walls, reinforcing the platons structures, cleaning in plateau, and doing the work, the technical work of capacity building here, but they need a bit of international capacitation, and then they need that they can work properly. We will have, and in both cases, maybe with the adaptive capacity, is moderate. We consider moderate. So we have the final table. No, if we do nothing, the vulnerable heritage places will be high, and after the intervention, we consider that not the vulnerability of platons will be low. Vulnerability of why? Because Camp Girard is really very sensitive to the climate change, to the hurricanes, because there are only a few enough. That's all. I think I think so brief, but I hope that you have understand how we have the methodology to both heritage important buildings in Haiti.
Thank you, Pachi. Thank you for the example, magnificent example, and the work that you're doing in Haiti. I'm now introducing myself. My name is David, and I'm going to screen and presenting. Okay, so if you can see correctly, well, my name is David, as I was civil engineer called Ines that is also working in the Caribbean and developing a rehabilitation project, in this case of Fort George. Fort George is an 18th in the island of Grenada. And we're working together with the local community, and we are using World Bank funds. So, yeah. First of all, I want to just show that where Grenada is located, because not all the people. It's really close to Trinidad and Tobago, and a bit further away of Cuba and Haiti, which was the last case study, no? That Pachi presented. Well, the location, the geographical location of the country allowed being kind of a hub for the commercial in the 18th century by Spanish, French, and British colonies. Now, George, going a bit deeper, no? It's a fortification that was built step by step, depending on the necessities that were coming or that were arising in history, French military, at the beginning of the 18th century. And all along the 18th century is characterized by that are a consequence of the different occupations that were ruling the island. No? The French and the British exchanged the occupation of Grenada, and in each case, each one was adding or removing different parts of the harbor. That is one of the main ports of the region in commercial exports at the time. It's important to highlight also the link with the recent history, as it housed a government coup that in which the Prime Minister Maurice Bishop was made prisoner and executed together with certain followers of him in the same fort. So that's a bit the link with the history. Our Kaiser. I'm sorry, I'm trying to stop this continuing, but there is not any. Sorry. So going about this. So we go. It's kind of a joke. Excuse me. One second, sorry. If we go directly to do the CBI assessment, no, that Scott introduced, and we had already studied a snapshot as well as Pachi. And here we start by the outstanding universal value vulnerability assessment, in which, first of all, we need to define usually being presented. No? In terms of key values, no, of the fort, the main key values are the location within the Caribbean, but within the country, as it has a great view of the capital town. It has a great view of the sport that we were, and with history, not only with colonial history, but with the recent history. And finally, there is also a key value that represents the architecture. Architecture, understanding architecture not as only the type of fortification of the time, but also which were used in the southern European countries in the 18th century, and that it's replicated all around the capital. Excuse me, I don't know what happened. So here we go now with analyzing the exposure. No? Once we have analyzed which are the key values, we need to analyze which are the exposure elements. As in the case of IT, we are subject to hurricanes, which is the main exposure factor, or stressor, as Scott and John like to call it. Hurricane belt and the hurricane exposure, we need to say that the Haiti and Grenada is the region with high vegetation, not hourly, which is what matters in terms of causing flooding problems and other events of that kind. So as you can see, okay, we go already directly to the vulnerability assessment of the outstanding values from the exposure. No? We have classified as very likely, and we have two stressors that we were saying. On one hand, the hurricane, on the other hand, I have just presented. There is a very likely probability of having this in the period of time that we need to consider intervention as designers. No? Additionally to this, in terms of sensitivity, we identify for elements, as you could see maybe in the video, that we are using. We are now using certain groups. Another, not so much, not so high. In this case, we modify sensitivity below. In the case of the high precipitation. Capacity, and we have to say that well, we have a low level of effectiveness, as we have classified because on one hand money, on another hand technical, scientific knowledge, but also mechanical, material, and maintenance knowledge regarding the interventions that are required in the fortification. So after all, we get okay, what does this tell us? No? On one hand, we can see that we have a potential extreme, reducing the sensitivity of our cultural heritage site. How can we do that? No, well, we propose to do that. In this particular case, what we do is, besides rehabilitating and other things, we focus on the defining connection details and compatibility, and finally recovering the original structural stiffness of the structure. Okay, besides that, we can state in this case, as Pachi was saying, by increasing the adaptive capacity. That we said that it was low. Well, how can we increase it? By providing money, by experts for different things, providing materials, providing machinery, and also very important, ensuring a good capacity building of the local people that we maintain. Okay, once we finished with the first stage of the CBI assessment, I'm going to just go quick on the. It's worth highlighting that for doing this, we should count with a higher support, with higher involvement, not support, because they give capacity support. But for this occasion, we didn't involve the local in a way with a subjective judgment. But I think that it's good enough to is the potential. The final clarification for the vulnerability is moderate. Well, unlike the case that one of the ones that Scott was talking about in Australia and in Scotland, I think it was. In this case, the condition, the poor condition in which the cultural site is currently, impact nowadays is low. And what can we do in order to improve this situation? And something that also should be considered, when we think of rehabilitating the cultural site of this kind. We don't only need to focus on perdurance or the physical but we need to try involve or make participate the people of the cultural values that our cultural heritage site has got. Now, in this case, what do we do? Which is our strategy? Well, we remove the cultural value in order to create spaces where we can celebrate concerts, exhibitions, and other type of shows. We rehabilitate also existing buildings in order to create the possibility of conference, museum, expositions of different kind that show also the culture of the local community, and find or a restaurant in order to provide dining services and that people stay longer in the port and enjoy of the view and of the other culture. I presented two case studies for showing how the CBI is applied, but two particular sites. I want to use the occasion to talk about a bit that we see nationally wise. What can we get if instead of analyzing only one site, we analyze all the sites that are located in the country? Where we believe that the national cultural heritage, it also would allow them to have a classification that allows them prioritizing the interventions that are required in order to optimize the investments, and all that based on an objective and transparent that from the different international institutions. The result of doing all this would be to increase the resilience and also to reduce the community. I'm done, and I'm going to give the word now back to Scott, sorry, that came with the CBI. John, I'm gonna share 1 second your video. Sorry. I'm gonna test the video.
Here again, you've just heard some applications of the CVI to Caribbean fortifications and some ideas there that we've used. It's important to note, and you see this on this screen, that application shot that's over on the right hand side, a rapid assessment with a few number of people, a very limited time frame, really applying in there. There were some, in addition, down the bottom nail framework pointing only to the values vulnerability section, but there were also some stretches into the community vulnerability that we've undertaken with those. Those are in contrast to the full workshop where we spend multiple days with a broad group of experts of diverse backgrounds to be able to in a little bit deeper that we mentioned earlier. So there are many benefits that we see for the CVI process. It's a rapid framework, but it's systematic, it's transparent, it's repeatable, and it has scientific rigor. Importantly, it can help the administering bodies. For the World Heritage example, the World Heritage Committee and the World Heritage Centre, to understand the implications of climate change, but also help the individual properties to undertake their reporting. To resonate with the process because of its transparency. And it's important to note that while it was originally designed for World Heritage, as we're seeing today, it's applicable to other formal and informal protected areas. Finally, we see an opportunity for a thematic approach, and we see these ideas of a thematic approach. I'd like to dive into that a little bit more for a moment. We have already some analysis for glaciers. We see an opportunity here for a cultural heritage thematic analysis, and perhaps that could be around fortifications, beginning in the Caribbean. To give you some more info on the CVI, we have a number of activities that some ships that have been postponed because of COVID, but others that are just beginning to find their way back to their timing, and also presentations. Finally, we want to acknowledge the many contributors and collaborators that we have with the CVI, including our workshop partner organisations, which is also why we're here today. Thanks very much for more information, and we hope to hear from you. Bye now.
Okay.
Well, thank you everyone for being here. I'm sorry for the technical problems that we finally were able to present everyone's presentations. I wanted, before finalizing the session, we still have 10 minutes. So if you have questions, we will have a round of questions and answers now at the end. But before that, I wanted to say thanks to the 4 speakers, and they connected at not very convenient times, as people in Australia or in Haiti. So thank you very much to all. And as they were saying, it's important that we count with some methodologies that help us identify risks and everything, so that we can inform the proposal of adaptation and mitigation and measure our cultural heritage. Because at the end, it's not only something that is going to help increase the identity of our or the idea of history that we have in each country, but it's also a source of economic activities, as we were saying in the evaluation. So it's important that we keep that in mind, and that we try to reduce the risk to buildings and assets in general. So now, if any of you have questions, we can go for, if you want, you can either write them in the chat, or as we are just a few people, we can even like raise the hand and to the speakers, as we have, as I was saying, 10 minutes left.
no questions? Well, I think in any case you have our contact. Have any doubts that you want to us to answer, do not hesitate to contact us, and we will reply with the information that you need. I think maybe we can say we can give it by as closed. If nobody shows any question. Okay, well, thank you. Thank you, Scott. Thank you, John. Thank you, Pachi, and mainly thank you, Barbara, for prepare this session. And well, we hope to keep in touch and keep in contact. Have a great. Bye.